Hey, good evening again, everyone. This is once more, I'm the Calm Scribe, and this is In Conversation with Writers CONduit. And actually, we're not talking to Writers CONduit, we're talking to two of the team members behind Sable Aradia and Author Goddess. So thank you very much for joining me tonight. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Writers CONduit was a fantastic event last year. I'm sure it's going to be even better and stronger this year. So how are you both doing tonight? Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having us on. I'm doing great. I've kind of been running behind about 15 minutes all day. I thought I'd missed this actually, and then I was like, "Oh no! Oh good. Okay," because my stream ran late. So if I sound a little wound up, that would be why.
Wound up is quite all right. There's nothing wrong with wound up. It's fun. There we go. I'm just fixing your banner here. There we go.
Yeah, I took a nap and then kids made supper, so I'm just kind of like, yeah.
I don't like you today. No.
Fantastic. So my daughter didn't take a nap, so I went to Popeyes and got dinner because
Good choice.
Yeah, just
Yep.
trying to cook and work and my wife cook, but it's a thing sometimes. So there we go.
Every now and again, you just have to, get store-bought.
Takeout exists for a reason.
Yeah, and that's the thing. There's times and there's purposes for it, and there is no issue with it. But Writers CONduit. I was saying before we came on stream that it's a dedicated team of volunteers that are working on this. I think you've been at this for over. Hey, thank you for the raid, Base Prefect. Thank you. It's I think a couple of months, if not longer, that the team has been working on building this out and getting things rolling. I think it's been more than a couple of months. How has the build-up for this been going so far? Because it is, for those of you who don't know, Writers CONduit is coming June 24th, 27th, and it is a 24/3 writers convention.
I'd say we've pretty much been planning it since last year, but
Yes.
we really kicked it into gear around the first of the year. And I think it's going smashingly, especially compared to last year. We were kind of throwing things together a little bit, and it still turned out wonderful. So I can't wait to
Yeah.
see how great it is this year.
Yeah, last year we didn't know what we didn't know. A lot of us have had experience in doing, organizing and group activities and festivals and whatever else before. But this was the first time we'd put together something like this on Twitch with so many channels contributing and so many different, scheduling things to take into concern and all that. And yeah, last year it was kind of a miracle that it all came together, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful chaos, but we learned what we didn't know. So this year we started right out the gate, like right after the last conduit. We gave ourselves a week, and then we were like, okay, let's plan the next one, guys. And this has all been coming together much more smoothly. I think that it's going to be great. It's going to be excellent. We have so many good panels. I can't wait to see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't wait. I want to try to catch some. Last year I was involved, I think, in 2 or 3 panels, if not 4, I don't remember. And this year I wasn't going to do any panels because I've just been flat out for the past few months, but I couldn't resist myself. I'm doing a panel on plotting. But it seemed like last year, like it was, I guess for lack of a better term, it all seemed like it was a victim of its own success. Like it was something that you had started out and you were going to do this thing, and then it just kept growing and growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was just awe-inspiring to watch this idea just literally explode for it to come out.
Accurate.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, there are two things that writers absolutely love: writers' conferences and not putting on pants. And we have combined that into the perfect event.
Yes, introverts unite separately.
Exactly.
In your own homes. But
Well-
yeah,
we were surprised by how quickly it grew, actually. And yeah, it did we didn't have the infrastructure in place last year, but this year we do. And it's great to see all the community support. Yeah, such a good community. We can't take credit for any of it other than to say people are just awesome here. And I'm so glad that so many people are willing to give so much of themselves and their time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic. The Twitch writing community is honestly a godsend. It's a fantastic thing. And I absolutely love it. But so before we jump into this year, so last year was getting it organized, getting it all sorted for the first time, figuring out what was going to happen. It happened. What was the postmortem on that? What was the tail end of that? How did it turn out? Did you have the numbers that you were expecting? Are you expecting, like, where was it a lot bigger turnout than you expected, or what was your takeaway from it at the end of the conference?
Well, the numbers were much bigger than I was expecting. I don't know about anybody else, but I was completely blown away by it. We had 3 tracks, in some places 4, of panels for close to 55 hours, somewhere around there. I'd have to look at the exact schedule to know for sure, but somewhere around there. And we had about, I'd say at least 20 people in every stream the entire weekend.
Wow.
And some were as high as, 70, 80.
Yep.
But yeah, 20's the number that sticks in my head as kind of the average of that, because I'm pretty sure there weren't more than, maybe 1 or 2 panels that even saw less than that. Yeah, and for 24 hours of panels, that's pretty dang good.
It is. I remember the panels I was on were all really well attended and received, and it was also nice because it's not often we get a ton of feedback from the chat when we're doing things, and I found through the panels and stuff, there was great feedback and it worked really well. That actually also brings to mind something that so I am doing the panel on the 25th on using tools for plotting, specifically Plotter. One of the reasons for that is I am the content developer for Plotter, so any of the templates that are in there, I design and develop the templates and all the instructions on how to use all the different outlining templates and stuff like that. I'm also the lead trainer, and I run all of the once a week training webinar for Plotter, and then I'm also redoing all of their training videos for their website and things like that. So there's a lot of things.
So you might know what you're doing.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a background on how to do it. However, I was in a meeting with one of the owners this week, and daughter's home, so you might hear some screaming. And I mentioned that Writer's CONduit was coming in, and I just wanted to get permission from all of you because they asked me if I'd be interested in putting the information for Writer's CONduit in the Plotter Facebook page, which has several thousand writers that use it.
Oh, please do.
To let them know when it's coming up, what's happening, and all those details and all that fun stuff to try to drive some people from the Plotter platform into the Writer's CONduit as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome. One thing we did find last year was that a lot of people who hadn't really explored the writers community on Twitch found us through the event, and that's what we want. And then they come, they start streaming, they start sharing their expertise. We all benefit, right?
Exactly. And for those of you that are in chat, just so you know, we do have Ted did a couple of panels last year as well.
Yeah, he did. It was great. And hi, Swiftness, how are you doing?
Yes, hello, Swiftness.
Good to see you.
So we can interact with chat. If you feel like if someone says something in chat, feel free to say hi and things. There is if you type guest in chat like I just did, there is the Writer's CONduit website, their Twitter page, and their YouTube page that you can go visit. And Ted, I would be more than willing and excited to do a live Scribes Journey broadcast next year for that.
Awesome. Yeah.
So that's something that we're looking at doing is bringing the Scribes Journey to different writing conventions and doing our podcast recordings at different events. So that could be a thing.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So it went, yes, Swiftness is very good people.
Yes.
So this is, last year was a smashing success, even with the growing pains and trying to get things moving and going. And honestly, I'm surprised that with how quick it grew, especially it seemed like near the end, there was just a lot of stuff like popcorn. All of a sudden, all the kernels are going off at the last couple of seconds. And it was smooth. It was, from my perspective, there wasn't a lot of headaches or issues or anything like that. It seemed the panels I was on went smooth, and it was a fantastic event. So what is coming up for this year? You've been working really hard since January, working since the last Writer's CONduit. What can people expect for this one this year?
We have 54 hours worth of panels. That includes the opening and closing ceremonies. And I've already been informed that the last person who is doing, because we have our panels, and then we also have chill and chat streams, which is different from the chat stream. Okay, so gonna rewind a little bit. Okay, so the Writers Conduit Twitch channel is doing a 24-hour just chat stream. This is where you can get all of your information. It's going to be kind of an information booth as well as just a chill out place. Then we have our panels, and we also have a chill and chat stream option. So people who want to do things that are more writer workshop kind of focused, or just, having the space to chill out to music and get some writing done after the inspiration of the panels kind of thing. And the last person that we have on our schedule has already requested that we give them permission to stream that chill and chat past the time of the closing ceremonies to give people a kind of a lounge area after the fact. And it worked really well last year. It's actually going to be the same person. So
yeah, Chloe Balkan did that last year, as I recall. She was great. I didn't know her before CONduit, but she was amazing. And
yes.
I thought it was just the perfect wind down. So I'm really glad she's willing to do it again this year.
Yes. So we got 54 hours. Every single minute of that 54 hours is covered by some kind of activity.
Wow.
Whether it's one panel or multiple panels, it's covered. There is something to do every single minute of that 54 hours, and that it makes my heart swell 3 times. I'm like the Grinch.
Yep. Yeah, it's beautiful. Sarah, Author Goddess, has taken responsibility for putting together our major master schedule. So hats off to her, because she's a genius. And this worked out a lot better than the scheduling last year. We both worked on the scheduling last year, and yeah. I think the reason why Sarah did it is because she was like, I am not going through that trauma again. I am going to do it my way right from the start. But yeah, she's a genius. It works. It's great. There's so much happening. What's interesting is that last year we did a lot of hand-holding. We knew that for a lot of people, this would be their first ever writers conference. They had no idea how things worked. How do you give a panel? What kind of things would people be interested in panels on? So we did a lot of, putting panels together ourselves and suggesting people for it that we knew in the community, right? One of the important things that Coffee Quills was looking for when she put together the original organizers team was, are you connected to a larger writing community on Twitch so that you know people, right? So, so we did a lot of that. This year we didn't. This year we said, okay, you guys know how it works now. You come to us. Bring us your ideas. What do you want to do? What do you want to see, right? Like most writers' conferences actually do, right? And we had no trouble filling the schedule because people really wanted to volunteer their skills. And that's the beauty of this, if you ask me. The fact that this is 100% grassroots organized, it's all of us in the Twitch writers community. We're bringing our skills to the table. We all have something to offer. We all have something we can learn from each other, and we're all coming together to do it. And yeah, people are just coming together. They know what's expected of them now, and they're stepping up, and that's great.
Yeah. And honestly, the sheer variety of panels that we have it's literally, if you write, you will find something. Guaranteed. I guarantee it. We've got people doing fanfic, we've got people doing PNR, we've got people doing world building for games, we've got people doing screenwriting, we've got songs for writing musicals.
Oh wow!
Like, if you write, if you write, you're gonna have fun. I mean, that's just the long and the short of it. Because one of the things that we really enjoy about the Twitch writing community is the variety of writers. We don't designate, well, we just do romance, or we just do fantasy, or we just, no. You put pen to paper and write anything. I will question people who write the paranormal, clown, horror, romance, erotica. I'm sorry, I can't get my brain around that.
Okay, well then that's
but
the
if you want
exact
to write
reason.
a panel,
That's the
if you
exact
wanna do a
reason why I
panel
didn't do
on
more
it,
panels, because I knew I just wouldn't be accepted in this. So.
Yeah. See, yeah.
Oh, you like clowns, huh?
Well, I mean, I do have Pennywise behind me, watching over my shoulder.
Facts. Yeah.
So,
But yeah, there's something for everybody, and the amount of knowledge that is going into these panels is amazing. I mean, that's really all there is to say about it. It's amazing.
that is fantastic. Yeah, because that's something that I really appreciate, the eclectic nature of everything that's in there, because these in conversations with that I do, they're generally writers. I've done other like artists and things like that as well, but I've had people that come in that compose music for orchestras, people that write songs and lyrics, people that write for video games, write novels, just a wide range of things, because writing is writing, and it doesn't matter if you're, so long as you're being creative and you're getting the words down or getting the ideas down, whatever, and using your skills to move things forward. It's a wonderful thing. I think next year I'm going to try to plan. I mean, next year my daughter is going to be a little bit older. She's 14 months, so it's hard scheduling everything. That's the reason why I wasn't going to do any this year.
Yeah.
But next year she'll be a bit older, and I'll be able to actually put in some stuff, because I'm an editor and an agent and all these other things, and a writer and all these other things. So I've got a lot that I can bring to the table for it. And I feel a little remiss not being more involved this year, but
cool. We'll hit you up for sure.
Yeah. But so is this going to be a lot of the same people that we saw last year, or is there a lot of new faces coming in?
Both. We actually have quite a high retention of people who are returning as participants, but I would say probably 25% are people that are either bringing in new people or are new people.
Yeah, that's probably about right. I was going to make about the same estimate, actually. Yeah.
Wow.
I hadn't thought of it till you asked, but yeah, there's quite a lot of new names that we did not see last year, but quite a lot of the same names too. So.
And that's exactly what you want to see, right? Is the people happy enough to return, and people excited enough to come in being brand new and trying to jump in on this. Mm-hmm. So this is going to continue being an annual event?
That's the plan.
Is there ever any thinking or possibility of turning this into a non-virtual thing, having an element of it that's non-virtual, like a kind of part, like a separate thing? Like even, my brain was going to the idea of TwitchCon, and when TwitchCon comes up, and having something where it's like there's going to be a writers convention at TwitchCon to help establish the writers in the Twitch community.
Well, I'll tell you this, if TwitchCon invites us to come and put on a conference there, I'll do it, right? But honestly, we haven't discussed that much. I'm not opposed.
I could see us going in that direction, but I think a really huge part of the appeal is that it is worldwide.
Yeah.
It is available to anybody who has an internet connection. You don't have to spend a couple $100 or $1,000 traveling somewhere.
It costs no monies except for your internet.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's such an exciting part of it. It's just such a great way of pulling people together for this. And I've seen other writers' conferences that are done virtually, and nothing quite like this. Like, they've all been, from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. or 10 p.m. or something, that shuts down and everyone goes home and sleeps at night. And so to have something that is just constantly on the go, constantly churning, is astounding, because it is, like you said, it is a worldwide event for this.
Well, and we actually have, I think it's 2 panels that talk about writing in non-English languages. So either writing in English as a second language, or translating, or things like that. So it really does appeal to a worldwide audience.
Oh, wow.
And the other thing is our organizers committee. Finding times to meet is kind of a nightmare.
There's one time we could meet.
One, and it's on my day off, right? But we're doing it anyway because that's when everybody can meet, right? Because we have everybody from the Eastern Seaboard to Tokyo.
Yeah.
Right. So that's it. There's this one time we can meet. It's terrible for just about everybody, but that's how compromises work. But as a result, right, we really can think globally about schedules and about availability. And we all have a variety of people we know who tend to stream in the same time zones that we watch. So we are able to pull together 24/3, as you said, programming, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And, you know, I mean, like, and it varies too, right? Like I'm an insomniac. My sleep schedule is often all over the place, right? I'm often up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I want something to watch, you know, right? So it's good to know that there are people there. Yeah. And I think, you know, I don't know. I sleep like 4 hours a night when CONduit goes on and then recover the next week, I think. So, yeah, you'll see a lot of me.
Yeah, I used to work in classical music, putting on, I would oversee over 130 concerts in a 2-week period. Over the year. It was, mine were, there was like 30 concerts in a 2-week period. And those were live and in person at the time. And yeah, it was the thing, it was 2 weeks where you worked 14-hour days every day for literally 7 days a week for 2 weeks. And then everything, like the day after, everyone came back into the office, put their stuff down, packed everything away, and then disappeared for 2 weeks. Just like crawled into a hole and died for a little while to get caught back up. Right. And that's festival life. That's conference life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and that's how a creative profession often works, right? It's feast or famine.
Yeah. That's the thing. And you have to be ready for that. And that's something that I get it. And that's one of the nice things with my company and also with Plotter is that I have clients all over the world, so it makes me being able to like meet in the afternoon and evenings and stuff like that works really well. And it's the same thing with Plotter, where they've got techs and staff all over the world, so there's always someone there to answer a question. And I love the fact that with the internet and really with the pandemic, it's really kind of pushed this to the light that, you know, we're separated and we're divided apart from each other, but we can be more connected and we can be connected at all times and really be there for each other and change the way business, writing, conferences, all these things occur and happen. And I think for as much negative came out of the pandemic, I think there are some real positives that have popped up as well that we can try to focus on and continue building on.
I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, this never would have happened without the pandemic, I don't think, because we all wouldn't have been, you know, so focused on...
We were
going to say that. We were desperate.
I just want to talk to a grown-up.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but you're right. And one of the things that has been good about that is that it has made it I think in a lot of ways it's more accessible for people that otherwise the world just has not been as accessible to. Like shut-ins, for example, right? Yeah. Like people with disabilities. Like people who are poor and can't afford $2,000 plane tickets. You know what I'm saying? Right? We're here. We're for everybody. Right? And there's a lot more of that going on. And that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And not just the plane tickets. It's free. You don't have to pay a $250 entrance fee to get into the conference or $30 entrance fee. Like there's some of these that I've seen. It seems like the smaller, I mean, obviously the smaller writers' conferences tend to have much higher entrance fees. They need to offset, but I've seen some of these that are for a weekend long event. It's $1,200, $1,300 to attend.
Oh God!
And something like this, it's free and it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
it's a perfect price point.
Yep.
So, can we get a bit of a sneak peek at what some of the schedule is going to be? I know we've glazed over what some of it is. Is there a possibility of seeing what some of the ideas that are coming?
Okay, so we will be starting. Now, this is all UTC 0, so that's like UK time-ish. Well, not anymore because daylight savings time, but...
Greenwich Standard Time.
Starts Friday at 6 p.m. with the opening ceremonies where you will see me and Sable and a bunch of other people goofing off, because we like to do that. and doing other things like introducing everybody to what is coming and being super, super loving and thankful for everything that is going on. And then we go right into the event with we have an immersing your audience panel, which is it talks about the techniques in writing used to get your audience really into your book really fast. And then we also have a food for thought panel, which discusses how cooking and eating affects culture and vice versa, and how you can apply that to your world building.
Ooh, nice.
I'm on that one. I'm
love that
looking
idea.
forward to it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. So to end off the weekend, just before our closing ceremonies at 10:30 p.m. on Sunday evening, that is, again, UTC 0. Just before that, we will have using TTRPGs in writing fiction. So TTRPGs being, of course, tabletop RPGs. Essentially the interaction between gaming and writing fantasy. And then we also have making fantasy worlds interesting, because haven't we all seen the same old fantasy worlds over and over again? How do you take that and make that a little bit different? So those are just a couple of the panels we got.
That's fantastic. And that's a big thing, because actually those last two panels you were talking about, we on my stream we do After the Roll, and we just broke down Legend of Vox Machina, which was fascinating to watch. Oh yeah. It was fascinating to watch, because it was, and LJ Stanton and I both stumbled a few times because we weren't following through Critical Role through the entire time. And so in the beginning we're like, okay, this is a tabletop RPG that has been turned into a show. Like literally their game has been turned into a show. So in the beginning we're like, okay, that bit of weird writing was because they had a weird role. And then in the middle we kind of hit this point where we're like, okay, this is just really weird writing. And then we kind of remembered, oh yeah, because it's not normal, it's from a thing. So you really have to set the typical rules of writing kind of aside a little bit. You still have to follow the key core principles, but you do have to shift things off. And then again with LJ Stanton, her fantasy series that she's writing is actually set in the Middle East, and that's something that we don't often see in fantasy world. It's a very westernized story structure that we have, the exception of Europe with Poland and things like that, with The Witcher and those kind of shows. But it's really very much a Western style. So that would be a fascinating panel to go check out on that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the kind of thing that I know that they were wanting to talk about. Right. So that's, there's things like how do you mingle later periods of technology with writing fantasy, for example? Like how does fantasy coexist with firearms, for example? Right. What happens if we have, Napoleonic War era and there's magic, stuff like that. Or what happens if we have, magic in space? There are lots of different ways to look at it, and it's going to be really cool. There's also some really one of the things I was going to say is that there's so many different levels of stuff. Like, it doesn't matter where you're at as a writer. If you just decided, you know what, I like writing fanfic on the weekends because I think it's fun and I'm bored, to, okay, I would like to make a career out of writing. I am making a career out of writing. I am doing things professionally, regardless of what level you're at. As far as that goes, there is something for you, right? There was one panel, let's see if I can remember the title. It's something about faith and AI and the implications in science fiction, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Another one was, using science fiction to resist social norms, right? There's some deep stuff here, guys.
Yeah.
Right. I remember
stuff.
the science fiction ones because, of course, I'm a science fiction fantasy writer, so that sticks with me, right? But yeah, lots of stuff. It's everything.
And we are continuing our, what I consider a really high goal. High morality, not high as in unreachable, high morality goal of encouraging diversity. We have panels on writing trans characters. We have panels on how to work with mental health.
That was a panel I was thinking about putting myself in, because I deal with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. I was like, I would really, but again, I didn't have that
We should make pins.
You shouldn't. I mean, that's the shirt, right? Love is love. Like, I love the fact that there's this, it's so inclusive with all of this.
Yeah. And that, just to be clear, that is pretty much the only thing we will outright ban people for is if you're being a douche about somebody else's identity.
Yeah.
We don't want politics, right? I don't, whatever your politics are is fine. Yeah. But if you bring, hatred of any kind, you're out. We're not even going to give you a warning. You're just gone, right? We are not interested in that.
It's the Will Wheaton rule of conferences. Don't be a dick.
Yep. No, that makes sense. And hi, Green Giant, by the way. Hello. But yeah, well, that's actually, I saw something the other day that made me laugh and also just really hit home. And it's for all these people that are talking about how you can't use, like, I don't know what pronouns to use or how to change and how to call you by a different name or something. They're like, you learn the name of a Pokemon after it's evolved. Don't tell me you can't learn the name of someone else once they've evolved. Mm-hmm. It's the same damn thing.
Look, here's the thing, right? I personally, so I identify as demigender, right? Which means that it's somewhere on that spectrum. Mostly I'm a girl, not entirely, right? Okay, I use she, they pronouns, either are fine, right? I don't care what you think of that. Just don't make it my problem, right? Yeah. If that you don't approve of that, so what, right? Have the respect to call me by the names and pronouns I asked to be called by, right? If I introduce myself as Sable Aradia, I expect you're going to call me Sable Aradia. I will call you, the Calm Scribe or Travis, depending on your preference, and I'll use whichever one you prefer. It's just like that, right? Just, what you think of me is none of my business unless you make it my business, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, there's no space for judgment or anything like that. It just... That's stuff that is so disheartening and sad to see. And I love the fact that we do have this equality that's being factored into this. But that also brings up to mind the idea of, you mentioned fanfics. And there's a few things that really get under my skin. Obviously, people being asshats like we just discussed. Mm-hmm. But also people that discount themselves or just discount fanfic in normal, like in general. They're like, oh, well, I'm not a writer, I just write fanfic. That's a very valuable, valid, solid way of writing, and you can...
Okay.
You can stay in the fanfic culture for that, because anything that's developed off of that is a few good elves.
This published novel started out as a D&D Spelljammer fan fiction project that I later adapted, took all the intellectual property and stuff out of, rewrote, and published. So don't tell me fan fiction isn't real writing, and don't tell me that it's real writing, and it's beautiful in its own sake. You don't have to do anything like what I did with it. I just wanted to actually publish the story. So I adapted it until I could, right? But it's perfectly legitimate writing. There are a lot of people who are much better known than I am, who are also fan fiction writers. And, like Sean McGuire, for example, right? I don't hold with that. Don't be dissing the fanfic writers, man.
Honestly, world building is hard, and that is having consistent world building is probably one of the hardest things about writing novels, especially if you're going into spec fic. And if you take that out, you're essentially writing fanfic because you're using somebody else's world building. And that is completely legitimate to practice part of your skills without having to practice the whole of your skills. Because if you have to start doing everything, how do you know what you're doing wrong? Yeah. That kind of thing. Now, the one thing that I would say is even close to illegitimate about fanfic is the idea that you can publish it as it is, which... that's a legal thing. That's not a personal opinion thing. You can't take somebody else's intellectual property. That's it. Otherwise, why would we deny people a way to practice their skills? That's silly.
In many ways, though, writing fan fiction is actually more challenging than writing your own world.
Yes, it does have.
okay, writing for hire, right? If you're going to write if somebody hires you to write a Star Wars novel, you are limited to what that world has already created, and you must make your stuff work with what they've already done.
True.
That's hard.
True. Yeah.
Right?
It is.
Fanfic is the same thing.
You're playing in someone else's sandbox. And that's the thing, is that it's something that, and that's, I've had people push back on me on this comment before, but essentially a lot of these things, like if you're seeing like the Star Wars, all these things that break off and the stories and movies that come out from it, they're all in some level almost a fanfic, because you're a new writer 100%. Coming in, working with characters that are not your own in a universe that's not your own. Because also developing characters is tough. I've always factored it down to the same thing as someone cutting their teeth as an artist or as a baker or a chef. As an artist, you learn by looking at what someone else has drawn and practicing drawing that and adding your own technique and tweaks to it. And it's the same thing. When you're becoming a baker or a chef, you learn by following recipes and guidelines and using what's already been built for you. And then you develop your own sense and style and develop your own recipes.
You know, you could literally argue that there are no original stories. It's just how much filing of the serial numbers you've done.
Facts.
You know, we do not create and avoid ever.
Yeah, everything is influenced by something.
And I totally admit when I steal stuff.
Actually, I usually point it out and call it an homage, because it is. I mean, obviously,
right?
Yeah.
You know,
well,
I wouldn't.
Okay. Because Wheel of Time just came out, you know, with the TV series, whatever you think of it. Robert Jordan was criticized for his first 3 books because, like, the first one in particular was so similar to Fellowship of the Rings.
Yeah.
But he was a huge fan of Tolkien, so of course it was similar to, like, that's what he likes.
Well, that's it. And there's actually another reason for it, too, is that 'cause I've read Wheel of Time from the very beginning. That's actually how we started with After the Roll. The first one was After the Weave, where we broke down the Wheel of Time. Then we did After the Roll, breaking down Vox Machina. And now on Monday, we're doing After the Night, where we're breaking down Castlevania. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. But the first book, when Jordan was writing it and he was farming it out and taking it to different places, they were anxious about it. So they actually got him to Tolkienize it a little bit more, because they knew that it would fit and it would sell, and they would have an easier opportunity to sell that. So it was somewhat forced upon him, and fanboying a bit as well, of why it became that method. And then as you see through books 2 and 3, they gained confidence and things were growing. They let him spread his wings, and the story went off and did its thing. And
then you have the epicness of book 4. Oh.
Well, yeah, but then we hit book 5, 6, and 7, where it gets really kind of a drag. But again, that was because the publishing house originally said we want 11 books, and then the success came out, and they're like, okay, we want 13. No, we want 15. And we want 17. So he ended up getting the contract extended so far, and he already had it kind of written in his head. So he expanded out the couple of the middle books, realized he was killing his own thing, and then did a stroke of genius and did a map book, did a prequel, and did another, like a thesaurus or something like that as well. And then branched off, so he got that 17-book mark without destroying the series entirely. Except for that
Bravo to him for making that work. Actually, that's tough. I mean, one of the reasons why I chose self-publishing, right, indie publishing, and a lot of what I'm doing is because I was not confident that I could tell the story outside of the format that I visualized. And I know that that's not how publishing works, because I've done some work with it, right? Like I've been professionally I've been, published by Medium traditionally. Yes, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. I've been published by Medium Press. I've been, I've done some stories for magazines. I'm a SIFWA member, right? This story is 5 books long, right? Yeah. And it has to be 5 books long. I can't have them by 1 book, because that's not the end of the story. That's the start of the story. Right. And that's not how things work in the publishing world, which is a traditional publishing world, which is why I chose to do it that way. So I get, bravo to him for making that work, because that's hard. And
exactly. And you maintain control over what you're doing, right? That's my psychological thriller series that starts with the book Project Persephone. It's because I apparently like really difficult names, like the Lion of Archinomus.
Apparently you do.
But Project Persephone is a trilogy. Psychological thriller trilogy, and it's actually also has 2, it's a W, because between book 1 and 2 is a Pulp Fiction. So it's a entirely different genre and style of writing, but it's a Pulp Fiction of what happens between the two books. And the same thing between books 2 and 3. And the design, so you can read the short Pulp Fiction and fall in love with the characters, know what's going on, and just read that and have an entire story, like a complete story from it. And then read the other one, because the concept being is we have such short attention spans. You read the Pulp Fiction, get intrigued on the storyline and stuff like that, and then you go back and read the novels. And you can either read the 3 novels and get an awesome storyline, you can just read the individual Pulp Fictions, or you can read the W and have the complete perspective of everything. And having a traditional publishing house run along with something like that is going to be damn near impossible to find.
Never going to happen. Yeah.
Right? And that's
Not
where
unless you're already famous. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's where you need to have the same thing with fanfic being illegitimate, this concept of, oh, well, self-published is because you couldn't get published traditionally. No, it's because I want to maintain control. I want to do something that's going to break the bounds, and that's going to shatter the minds of everyone that's in the traditional publishing service.
Exactly.
Look, the fact is that publishing is a business, right?
Yep.
And in traditional publishing, they have an idea that they believe, right, is a winning formula.
Yeah.
Right? It's wrong.
It is wrong.
Alert.
Publishing is the most opaque industry in the world. You have no idea what's going to work and what isn't, but they think they know.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
And so that's what they're going to produce because they know that that's a winning formula, right? No, that's a winning formula, which is why, the big success comes out, Harry Potter, and all of a sudden we have all these, juvenile magic school stories, right? The Twilight becomes a thing and all of a sudden everything's a vampire romance, right? And it's because they think they know that's going to work, right? And ultimately it's a bottom line issue. Now, even the most I have no doubt that most of the people who are actually doing professional editing and publishing and whatnot in the traditional field really do care about books, right? And really do actually want to see writers succeed and fiction improve and all that, but they know they're limited by the business model, right?
Yeah.
In independent publishing, you can take that risk that you can't afford to take and the bigger the publishing house, the less risk you can take, which is why all the books being published now are biographies by people you already have heard of. Right?
Well, and that's just it. Like that's one of the reasons why with Waxfield Productions we do publishing. It's an indie publishing house that we do the stuff with, and that's one of the things with that is I try to, because I'm an agent, so I will take your work and try to get it in the hands of traditional publishers, or we'll publish it through Waxfield Productions. There's things that we play both sides of the coin on that. But what I try to express to my clients, and it is a really hard thing to get some people to understand, is because when you put your heart and soul into something and you throw it out into the universe and it gets shot down over and over and over again, it's really easy to get disheartened by it. But you have to understand, if it's not picked up by a traditional publishing house, it doesn't mean that it's not a good book. They're not judging the quality of the book necessarily. I mean, to a degree, yes, they are. But they're not judging the quality of the book. They're judging whether or not they feel they can market that book and they can sell that book.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right?
That's exactly it. I agree 100%. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's a really big thing for it. And I mean, and that's the thing, too. We see things like, we're not support your local wizard. N.K. Jemisin said she secretly writes fanfic. See?
Yeah.
And SJ was saying she had a university teacher who said fanfic wasn't actually writing. And so all of this stuff, I have
opinions about that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's heartbreaking, and it's really hard it's the type of gatekeeping that drives me wild, because that can stop someone from writing. That can stop someone from practicing, from trying, from moving forward. And I mean, if we look at things, there's the whole thing with Harry Potter, of Neil Gaiman. I won't get into it, but if you want to look at an interesting book cover, look up Neil Gaiman Boy Wizard, and there is a boy flying on a broomstick with a scar on his forehead, wearing round glasses, and an owl sitting on his shoulder. That came out several years before Harry Potter did.
Interesting.
And, yeah, and there's also the whole thing, like, apparently 50 Shades of Grey was a Twilight fanfic originally.
Yeah. And
got turned into 50 Shades of Grey. So there's like, yeah. I don't believe in stepping on someone's dreams. If someone is working towards writing, and if they're not there yet, you coach them, you help them, you bring them along.
Yes.
And unless it's absolutely abhorrent, and then that's like, well, maybe you should draw instead.
Well, and like, okay, the thing is, as a creative, walking out of a movie theater, I'm already writing fanfic in my head.
Yeah.
Now, that may actually transform into something that is a more original story, but that's where we get our ideas. That's what we do. It's not that we're coming up with something original out of the ether. We're putting things together in new ways.
Yeah.
And that means that we need those inspirations, and it's absolutely ridiculous. As long as people are following, copyright laws, although, there are some of those that I have issue with too, but that's a whole nother discussion.
Burn Disney to the ground. Anyway, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, two things that I want to say out of that, right? One is that this is one thing I really, I love Stephen King. He's one of my big influences. I'm going to say that right now. I'm also going to point out that he has made an entire career out of rewriting 1950s science fiction plots. That's what he does. That's what his stuff is. It's awesome, but that's what it is. Okay, for example, The Stand. I know where that came from because he cited some of his influences in a couple of his books on writing, which I've read, right? I've read Dance Macabre and On Writing, right? Okay. Dance Macabre is the book that made me realize I wanted to be a writer, by the way. I read that when I was 10. I did it by accident. I was going through the Stephen King section. Nobody realized it was a nonfiction, right? And I started reading it. I'm like, this is me. I am this. I want to do this, right? Okay, so, all right. But the point is, okay, so there's a novel called Earth Abides. And George Stewart, I want to say is the author's name, is Stewart's last name. I remember that for sure. I know where Stephen King got the idea for The Stand. Because in this book, right, it's the same thing, right? This guy was up in a cabin in the woods by himself for 2 weeks. He came back down and the world had ended due to a massive plague, which he seemed to be immune to, and a bunch of other people, and eventually they kind of started reforming society. Eventually, one of the characters decided he was, like the protagonist, he's going to go wander around the remains of the United States, right, and see what has happened, right? And he goes to the New York Tunnel, right? And he looks into it and he goes, I think that's going to be full of a bunch of dead bodies and horror. I'm not going in there. And he kept walking on. And Stephen King, I know for a fact, right? He didn't write it, but I bet you if I asked him, he would say, yes, this is where I came up with the idea for The Stand, because I'm certain he came up with the idea when he read that and he went, I wonder what would have happened if he'd gone in.
Yeah.
Right.
See, and that's taking an idea and moving with it. Swiftness was saying, like, this year's old when I learned that Danse Macabre was nonfiction. But that's my project for Versiphius. Came about in a similar way, where I saw an interview with Quentin Tarantino, and he said that when he writes his movies, first thing he does is he lays out his entire record collection, picks out the artist that he wants to listen to, picks out certain songs, spends days listening to different music, creates the soundtrack, and then writes the movie from the soundtrack.
I sort of do that, actually. I didn't know he did that, but I used to say, the goddess and I, we've had a discussion about this. I said, I don't do outlines. She's like, you do outlines. Everybody does outlines. You either do it at the end or the beginning, but either way, you do an outline.
Yes.
I do an outline. What I do is what I call my novel opera, right? I put together a playlist of songs where every song, it represents one of the major events in the novel, yep. Right? And then I listen to it over and over until I get a feeling of how it's going to go, right? That's my outline. I get it. Yeah.
That's what I did with Project Versiphius. There was a song from the 1950s, Shirley Ellis, the clapping song, and it's 689, the goose drank wine, the monkey chewed tobacco on the streetcar line, and right. It was this like patty cake song, and I heard that and I was like, my brain immediately came up with a fantastically horrible, twisted scene. A torture scene to this patty cake song, and then that just blew out the story from that. I just got other songs and built out from it, and it was a lot of fun. And that's the thing, is that there's going to be different things that are going to influence you, whether or not it's an outright you're taking that and using it. There's something, and that's where it comes down to rule breaking as well. I was talking on stream a little while ago that if you're going to, like, there's some times in a story where it can be almost impossible to not info dump. There's something that comes up and you have to info dump something. You have to get the information
Yep.
expressed, especially if it's the info dump of the characters already know this information. So in my science fiction, there's a section where the new guy is like, well, or one of the people in the military is talking about this whole thing. And then just after he gets past the point of what I needed the reader to know, the guy, the commanding officer that he's talking to, kind of like screams at him. He's like, I know this. I went to grade school as well. Like, what the hell's your point? And just rips into him for saying all of this stuff. And he's like, yeah, I went to that school as well. What are you doing? And then so and that comes down to the same thing, that if you're going to pay an homage, if you're going to do something, call attention to it. Bring it down and be like, this is what it is.
I'm going to say it. You wrote an exposition by mansplaining.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
That is so good. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just something that, like and that's what my big thing when it comes down to outlining is, even if you don't outline your stories, you need to know what the different story outlines are and how they function and where they've come from, their history.
Yes.
Because you cannot, what I was taught in math is you cannot break the rules until you know what they are and why they are and how they function.
Yeah.
And once you know that, then you can break them and you can have fun with it.
Yeah. Yes. I can't agree with you more. And I'm a plantser, right? So yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. And at some point, you have to hold your story up to, like lampshading. At some point, you have to hold your story up to a lampshade or to a light and compare just either mentally or actually looking at it like, okay, this is the story beats for the hero's journey. My story is kind of a hero's journey. Do I kind of have things lining up approximately the way they should be? And again, I'm never one for saying that you have to be bang on at the 10% mark. You have to have the inciting incident happen in the meeting with the mentor immediately after.
Yeah.
It's around that. If it's at the 8% but I mean, if you have that happening 30% in, you're going to have a problem with your story.
The way I explain it is there is a reason that these story beats are so popular. It's because they work.
Yeah.
This is not trying to restrict you. This is trying to help you.
Yeah. And you naturally, when you're as a writer, you naturally know these things. You've read a lot. You naturally can hit these beats. So you don't actually have to sit down and plot everything out, but you do have to compare the plot. And I've had people say, even with the Save the Cat, we're like, oh, that's too formulaic. My story is going to be terrible. It's like, well, no, if you look at it, if you look at the recipe for an omelet, you're cracking some eggs, you're scrambling them, you're throwing in ingredients, you're cooking it a certain way. You follow the same recipe. Everyone's going to make an omelet. But the spices, the ingredients, the methodology and everything that you use is going to make that your omelet, and it's not going to be like anyone else's. And it's the same thing with using a story outline. If you're using and hitting the beats approximately where they've been proven to function and to work and to grab the reader's attention, you can just plug in the exact same kind of stuff over and over again and have very formulaic stories coming out, which I find it's a lot of the people that, like, I've seen people that have done formulas where, like, you'll write...
James Patterson does it.
Yeah, well, people that are like, you'll write 30 stories in a year, or you'll come out with like 10 books a year, and it's like, yeah, but they're all going to be kind of basically the same thing, because it really is just, this is my pattern, swap out the name, swap out the action, and then go on with it. But if you tweak it and change it and add your own spice to it, it's not going to be the same as everyone else's or as what you've done before. So
that's why we all love the twist. We like the pattern, but we also love the twist.
Yes. And that's why I don't think I don't believe that there are any concrete rules in writing. Like there's concepts and core structures that you need to understand, but everything is meant to be broken, and that's
more of a guideline, really.
Yeah,
like the Pirates Code.
Yeah.
But that's where it comes down. You have to be careful with these things. With the Lion of Archinomus, I wrote out an outline for it, and then as I was writing, I realized I had to add a bunch more stuff in. And I started writing the story, and all of a sudden I looked and I thought, my two main characters aren't meeting each other for the first time until chapter 8. Mm-hmm. And that is when they are working together for the duration, like for the entire book. That's a little bit late to have the meeting. So I actually, because the outline isn't set in stone, you can set your beats down, and then you realize, well, no, this has to happen first, and that needs to move, and you shift things around, and then all of a sudden you need to take that holistic look and make sure that you don't have two of your main characters meeting 2/3 or a third of the way through the novel.
Honestly, that's part of the reason why, A Few Good Elves is book 1 of 5, right, that are intended, because Okay, so I actually the same kind of thing happened. I had a lot of, backstory, right? And it was about that 8 chapters, right? And I tried taking it out and it made no sense because the you didn't understand why the characters were doing what they were doing. You didn't get their motivation, you didn't get what had brought them to that point. So
Yeah.
I needed it. So it actually the story, there is a story arc that completes there, but it's, act 1 of 5. Act 1 is complete, right? Like every chapter is its own little mini story, they say, right? It's
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, exactly, right? That's why I had to do that, because yeah, it was the actual meat of the story did not start until chapter 9, right? So
That makes sense. So this is also when people are coming in to write as CONduit, they're, like you said, from anyone from any stage in their journey in writing. If it's fanfic and from beyond, it's going to be there for you. And I love the fact that there's so many in-depth, like deep panels. It's not just this is how you design a character. Like there's actually some in-deep thought and thought-provoking panels that go into it. There was a Writing Excuses podcast episode I heard, which was talking about the importance of doing research when you're doing historical fiction, and even like
yeah.
the fabrics that are used. That wool was only available at times at certain places of the world, and
Yeah, it's a big
understanding
deal.
why there's so many buttons on women's boots and all these other things. There's just all these neat little tidbits. And so the nice thing about going to something like Writer's Conduit is no matter where you are in the stage of your writing career, you are going to be inspired and you are going to be inflated with energy and passion and confidence. Because all these things, like the teachers that say, university teacher that says fan fiction isn't writing, you're going to have a bunch of writers that are published, that are not published, that are self-published, that are whatever, that are going to prove to you otherwise.
Yep.
And
Thank you for bringing it back to that. Actually, the other thing I was going to say out of what you guys were talking about there was that there's no gatekeeping in the Twitch writing community that I have seen. We all recognize.
there's a moment you always have that one guy. You know that one guy.
Okay, well, I don't hang out with
But
that one guy, and I don't see
we
that
we
one
usually
guy a
get rid
lot.
of the one guy.
Yeah, the one guy doesn't tend to have a big audience. Let's put it that way, right? But the fact is, regardless of where you are in your writing journey, we are all doing the same thing. I mean, here we are. We got totally off topic, sort of, on this nerding out about plot beats and outlines, and I'm here for it, right? But we're all like that, right? Like we all have something to contribute to that conversation, and we're all doing the same thing, and regardless of what your writing goals are. Like writer Greg, one of my favorite writers on Twitch, right? He has no intention of publishing stuff. It's not his goal,
Yeah.
right? And that's great. Writing for its own sake is valuable, publishing doesn't make you a writer. Writing makes you a writer.
And that's something that brings up a good point, because I actually had, hey Eli, welcome,
Hi, Eli.
welcome. And Prefect, I don't think we were talking about, they were talking about you on that one, on being that guy. But no, that's, I actually had something a little bit heartbreaking happen to me a little while ago, because I run the writer's room where people get together and write on Fridays, but I also do another writer's room for another professional organization that you have to be a member of. And I had a person, some of them that are in this are writing just for fun. They're not planning on getting published or anything like that. And so we've been doing this writing room for a little while, and people were expanding their career or their goals and getting better at what they're doing. The conversation was getting more in depth, as happens in these kind of things. Then I got an email from someone that was just saying that, you know what, I don't think I fit in this any longer. They're like, I'm not at the caliber that everyone else is. I'm not taking it as serious as everyone else is.
No.
So I'm not going to be taking part in this anymore. And that really broke my heart, because that's like the group. Well, at no point did we say you have to be at this level, you have to be doing this stuff. And there's a number of people that I know that have no intentions on publishing. They're writing because it's cathartic. They're writing for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. I was just talking to someone the other day that was saying that, they said, I'm not an author because I've not been published. I said, being an author doesn't mean that you've been published. To me, an author is, if you're writing short stories, if you're doing flash fictions and stuff like that, then you're a writer and you're doing that kind of stuff. If you've done like a novel, if you've written a long thing, then that's more of what an author would be. And I don't think you have to be, like I said, if you've written 5 novels and you've never published any of them, does that mean that you're not an author? It makes you an unpublished author, in my mind.
Yeah,
Right?
you know what? That's an interesting thing. Everyone's got a different definition, right? But
Yeah.
I tend to agree on that perspective. I think I have said before that the difference between a writer and an author is that the author is published and that's it. But no, because I agree with your definition there, right? And that definition being that, okay, yeah, if you wrote 5 novels, you're an author. Shit, you wrote 5 novels,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you. That's awesome.
That reminds me of okay, so I still every now and again pop up into the Book of Faces just to check on stuff, and isn't it amazing that every time I do, I get a message from one of my author groups that's like, I'm a writer, but I don't have time to write, so I would like a ghost co-writer to write my story, and then I'll give you royalties, and everybody's just like, tell me how that's going to work again, bruh.
Yeah.
And it kind of drives home the way that Twitch is really about supportiveness.
Yeah.
Like Twitch is very, very like I don't know what it is about the format that just draws out people supporting each other. And in other social medias, particularly I've noticed it on Facebook, it tends to be more competitive. And I really like the fact that we can bring in all of that support into this conference and get people not where we think they should be, but where they want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. That's what I love about the Twitch writing community. When I first came on Twitch, I thought, who is going to want to sit and watch me put words on paper? And apparently there's
Lots of people.
Right, it's a thing. But I've always been super supportive, and I believe that we get ahead by pushing others and having them lift us, or turning around and lifting up once you've gotten somewhere. And that's something that I've always led my life in that manner. And that's something that I find is great with Twitch. Like, I have people that are now part of my community that have come from other writers' communities. I have people that are from my community that I've raided into other writers and are now in other writers' streams. And I've got people in my community that will actually leave my stream to go watch another writer when they go on stream. And at no point do I feel irked or irritated or anything like that, because it's such a supportive network. And I don't find myself to be in competition with anybody. If your book gets published and something happens with it, or something great is happening, I'm going to celebrate you and sing you from the rooftops just as much as I would hope people would do for me when something like that happens. And that's something that I find is fantastic about the Twitch writing community, is that we have that I don't think I've ever seen anyone be really cranky or be anything but super supportive of each other in this. And I think that's where this is going to make CONduit even more amazing and exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like to say, look, your readers are never going to get angry at you for suggesting another book. People who like to read.
And sometimes if you're running behind schedule, that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to be another 3 months. Go read this book instead.
Yeah, that's right. Right. Competing does nothing but create tension. It's absolutely unnecessary in this industry. We have the luxury of not having to worry about that, even if we're professionals, right? We don't have to, because readers always want more to read. So the best thing you can do is go, hey, I know this great writer and I love their work and I think you would like it too, because they'll remember you said that. Right. And then that writer will also remember that you sent someone their way, and then the rising tide raises all the ships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, I'm stealing Sable's phrasing here, but as a blue collar writer, I am a union gal. And
there you go.
The best way for us to make writing a valued part of society that gets money to everybody who participates in that industry at a living wage, in order to create that kind of mindset around writing, we're going to have to be together. We're going to have to work together. We're going to have to support each other. We're going to have to use our numbers. We don't need to scramble upon each other. We don't need to kick each other in the shins. None of that. That doesn't help. We need to have the union mindset where
You
We
got it,
prove
base.
that we are valuable as a whole.
Yeah.
Yep.
Extremely well said. And that's the thing. And that's something that I love about, and I love Eli saying, I'm not publishing for another 8 months. Go check Sable and AJ's books. They kick butt.
Thanks,
Seize
Eli.
the means of
Eli's
production.
books are
Down
great,
with the
too.
bourgeoisie.
I'm a fan.
Yeah. Down with the bourgeoisie. I agree. But that's something that I think I love. One of the things that I really caught my attention that I love about Twitch and the writing community on Twitch is the stuff that I see on a daily basis in the traditional publishing world, in the writing world that's there, doesn't exist. Women aren't being held down. Women aren't being forced to use male pseudonyms to get published or to get attention. Trans authors are being supported and have a ton of people watching them and interested in what they're doing. The LGBTQ plus community is well represented. Like, it's nobody has to hide behind a wall or a shield to try to get attention, to try to get views on what they're doing and on themselves and get their work out there. And that's one of the things that really draws me and warms my heart about the Twitch writing community, is that it is real.
We're proving to traditional publishing as a whole mindset thing, because I know a lot of us do dabble in traditional publishing at points, but as a mindset, we're proving to them that they're wrong. That you don't have to have a female character, a female main character who is in a romantic relationship in order to make them relatable.
That's right.
I was actually told that to my face. I can't even, I still can't get over it.
Yeah.
But,
Told it's a good thing I was writing fantasy, because women can't write science fiction.
The entire science fiction genre was started by a female. That's
Right?
what I
Yeah,
love.
that's right.
Mary Shelley
Shelley.
started the science fiction thing when she was a teenager.
Plus, when's the last time you walked into Barnes and Noble or, whatever your bookstore of choice is, looked at the, category of books that you were in, and without, being like specifically on the hunt for a book or author, picked up a book, thought it was great, and then either noticed or changed your mind about the book based on whether the author was male or female?
Yeah. Well,
Who
The
does
reader
that?
does not care.
No,
we've
Reader doesn't
got stats now. People have done research.
Yeah.
The reader does not give a damn. They don't
it's
care.
the story. And it's the same thing as and the thing that used to drive me absolutely wild was, that's a girl's book. Oh, that's a boy's book. Girls and female writers write for
Are you
girls,
reading
and
it
male
with your
writers write for
genitals?
boys. It's like, what is wrong with you?
I want to know who is reading books with their genitals.
I am close. It's almost done being trained. It just needs a little bit more.
There you go. That's exactly. No. Yeah, but the fact is that a lot of industry professionals think the readers care.
Yeah.
And because they think that, there is the reality of the fact that women authors, trans authors, non-binary authors are not given as many opportunities as male authors.
Yeah.
Black authors are not given as many opportunities as white authors, right? In the traditional field, because the industry thinks that they care. So they get less review, the marginalized groups get less reviews, they get less professional attention, they tend to be more critically reviewed when they are given professional attention. There's standards and expectations. If they decide that your book is like women's fiction or whatever, they make sure to put a bunch of pink and lace and crap on the cover. Right? But we don't have any of that here.
Well, and that's the thing, and that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought that up. And just to clarify what we're talking about on this is that, yes, the readers don't care, but like Sable just said, the industry does care. And because the industry cares, the industry is artificially holding down marginalized groups, and there shouldn't be. And we're saying that needs to stop, because that's all BS and is ridiculous. And that's actually one of the things I've done, because I'm in Canada, and right now it's National Indigenous History Month, and obviously it's Pride Month as well. And so my company's actually created a discount for coaching services for any member of the LGBTQ plus or the Indigenous community to help build their voices and bring their voices to the forefront, and not have to fight back against some of this marginalization. Because fact of the matter is, when you're marginalized, that impacts your wallet, and you don't have as much money to do what, because that's the thing, is that being privileged doesn't mean you've never gone through hardships in your life. It means you're not fighting extra bullshit that everyone else is.
Yep, that's a fact. Okay, like in the same industry, and it's not Olympics either. There's the intersectionality factor, right? Different things come into different play depending on what the circumstances are and the various conditions and who is in what position of power. We also don't talk about economic advantage a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a thing. Class is real. Right.
Oh yeah.
If you have the time, right, and the money, right, if you have the money that you don't have to work a regular 9-to-5 job, you're going to have more opportunities for writing because you don't have to care whether or not you sell the story. Right away, you can take your time, you can take classes, you can develop things, you can work more on it, and like anything, you practice
and
it more, you
afford the
get
classes.
better. And afford, yeah, exactly, right? You can do all that, right?
Oh, and afford the marketing, which I'm sure was your next point.
Yes, the marketing, which is a factor regardless of whether you're traditional, independent, or small press. That,
like, would my first novel have sold 10 times better if I'd been able to afford a book bub? Probably.
Yeah,
probably,
right? So yeah, I mean, and so that's the thing too, right? And yeah, this all comes together, and the more all of this is okay. I guess all right. One of the ways, sorry, Sarah knows I'm getting on my soapbox. Okay, here we go.
We could do many streams on this soapbox.
Oh, we could.
Let's go for it though.
Okay, all right. So the working class writer soapbox here, okay? The industry is designed for rich dilettantes who have all the time in the world and don't have to care how much money they make. It's bull crap. It's crap, right? This whole industry is crap. It's designed to take advantage of the labor of hardworking people. We can reform it, right? We can reform it through things like crowd publishing, right? Through through Patreon, through supporting each other on our Twitch channels, by, collectivizing and working on collective projects together, right? These are the kind of things we can be doing. Writers Conduit is one example of ways in which we can collectivize and work together and put our labor together for the benefit of everybody, right? And, I think we have to, right? Because the value of creativity is so undervalued in our corporatist
capitalist
world, right? Yeah. That we really have to do things to make some major changes in order to make this viable.
Because I mean, it's the way the system is set up. If you are spending 5 years writing out your first novel and selling it for $10-15 a pop, earning $1 per sale, how is that ever going to be sustainable?
Well,
it's not. It is not designed to be sustainable. The arts were designed to be patronized. Not in the talking down to, but in the sense of rich guys support. I want a sugar daddy, damn it.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, and that's with my company. It's I created Wax Seal Productions for two reasons. One, I got tired during the pandemic of getting a job and having the company not being able to sort their own finances out, and me being on the butt end suffering of that. Being like, well, we have to cut your hours, we have to stop you, we have to do whatever because they can't get their act together. And the other thing is the tagline for my company is making the literary journey accessible to all. So except for my agent 100%. Fees, because my agent fees come off of, you don't pay me anything until the book is placed. So if the book never gets placed, you never pay me a dime. If it's
for traditional, I got to talk. I need an agent.
Yeah, well, let's talk. But the other thing
you might actually get two by the end of this.
Well, the other thing is all other stuff I do, my editing, my manuscript review, my coaching, my web development, my social media marketing, all the stuff that my company does, it is all based on an honor system scale. I've got my rates, and if you're a corporation, if you're a company, my rates are my rates. If you're an author, if you're a writer, then I've got a lot of people that I work with that I have severely cut my rates down for. There's one person I know of that I carved
Absolutely.
because they didn't have a lot of money. I cut my rates by 90%
That's awesome.
to get
of
them
you.
where they needed to be and for doing their thing. And it was a one-time deal for them. But that's the thing, is that it doesn't need to be that level of just like, we can be patrons amongst ourselves. So I've got other clients and the agent side of things that can bring in the money that the company needs, right? Because if you place a book with a traditional publishing house, you get a big chunk of cash that comes in for the company, and you use that to offset for everybody else. And it's completely on the honor system. If you tell me that you don't have enough money, you can't afford the rates, well, what can you afford? And I don't cut what I'm doing for you. You get the exact same level of service of someone who's paying the full amount, on the understanding that when your finances improve, the payment goes up.
You will. Yep.
Yeah,
That's,
we
that's
start
awesome.
going back to normal rates. And because this journey
need more
needs to
of
be
this.
accessible to everybody, not just those that have money, not just those that, because the other thing that my wife can attest to me, like cracking teeth, gritting them on this, is when you've got things, no offense to the guy, fantastic at what he does, but people like Jimmy Fallon, who created a kid's book, Dada, and the only thing is a little baby animal going up, Dada, 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 through the entire book. Instantly published, instantly picked up, sold in all the stores, sold in baby stores, all this other stuff, solely because of the name. Solely because they have that behind them. And the same thing, a person I know that lives close to me is a sports reporter, and they've got a book that's coming out, and it's fantastic that they've got this book coming out. It's great. They've never written a book before. They got picked up by HarperCollins.
Yeah. Nice, huh? It must
And
be
it's-
nice.
Yeah, but it's because of the name that's behind it.
Yep.
And that's the thing, is that's the bourgeoisie, as Base said. He said, I've worked
Well,
with
and-
Scribe. I've been unemployed for over a year and a half. He's been such a help. Thank you, Prefect. I appreciate that.
Doesn't
Eli,
doesn't
I'm
that
with you. You want my writing? Pay me. That's right.
doesn't that really kind of speak to the ease by which so many people dismiss writing? You know,
Yeah.
it's something that you do after you've already succeeded at something else. Or, you know, like one of the really big ones that I've seen in copywriting is, well, anybody can write a description. Okay, if anyone
I'm
could
going
do
to
it,
hurt
it would
that
be part of
person.
somebody else's job description, not a job description unto its own. So there.
That's the thing. And that's where it comes in. Like I've said this constantly in my stream. I edit people's works professionally. I have an editor. I self-edit
That's
my
right.
work, and I have
You
an editor
have-
that I pay to edit my work.
Never edit your own work. I do editing too.
Well,
but
I mean,
get
edit your
Sarah
own
to
work,
edit
but
my
as a
stuff.
part of
Yes,
it,
but then you
the
give it
entire
to
thing.
someone else
Yeah,
that can set
that's
eyes
right.
on it.
Sarah's my editor.
Your brain,
Yeah.
your brain is a jerk. Your brain will hide things from you, especially
Does.
the parts where you have to face the fact that you made a mistake. Your brain hates that. It will hide it from you. You will not see it.
Or it'll take you on a fantasy trip. That's the thing that I find is I'll be
Yeah.
reading through what I've written, and as I'm editing, also my brain's like, oh yeah, when I was writing this scene, there was a really nice bird singing outside, and it was a beautiful day. And now I'm five chapters or five paragraphs down. And I'm like,
100%.
shit, I have to go back and
Yeah.
So it's
that's
you
right.
can't do you need
can't.
to have someone, but that's the thing is that we do need to work through things like Writers Conduit, through Twitch, through whatever, and break the system and prove that
That's right.
because I know when the self-publishing system really first started, like with Amazon and all this other stuff, there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of stuff attached to it, and a lot of stuff that came out was crap and wasn't very good. That has changed.
Yeah,
And these things that you go to, like Wax Seal Productions and stuff like that, like it's not self-publishing, but we're not a big traditional publishing house, which, by the way, an interesting tidbit, unless it's changed over the years, all eyeglass companies are owned by one corporation. They're all umbrellaed under one.
Oh, okay. Because clearly we need to incorporate Travis into our 12-hour rant stream there that we're planning on doing, Sarah, because clearly he's on our page.
Well, yeah, because the other thing is all the
That's-
major publishing houses are now umbrellaed under 5. They've all been picked up, or 4 now. So they've all been picked up by 4 publishing houses that run all the traditional publishing.
All of it. Yep.
That's why you go with the mom and pop shops.
Yeah.
All media in Canada is owned by 3 companies, regardless of what field it is in. And it's even worse in the United States, right? Like 3 companies own all the TV except for the CBC,
Yeah.
right? 3 companies own all of the newspapers. They're different companies, right?
Yeah.
3 companies own all of the radio stations.
No, there's Post Media and there's a bunch
Yeah,
of others.
but as long as it's 3 and not 1, it's not a monopoly.
Yeah, no, because those 3 people get together in a back room.
I was going to say,
Isn't this why
each other's backs?
Isn't this why we smacked the railroad tycoons with a banhammer? Like, we hit them really hard years ago for this same reason.
There's a word for that. It's not a monopoly, but it's when you've got not a conglomerate, but you've got the 3, like the mobster. There's a mobster term for
cartel.
Yeah, it's almost like a cartel.
Batsu almost. Yeah, it's not on. And we do need to find ways around the system, but this is one of the ways we do it, right? We democratize, we collectivize, right? And this is one of the platforms in which we do that. Speaking of which, I do trade in kind, right? Often, instead of charging fees for things that I do, I would rather. It's much more valuable to me to have somebody do like set up some marketing stuff for me if I'm going to do your edits, because I'm terrible at that crap. You know, right? We can help each other, right? And I like doing that kind of thing, right? So, and these are ways we can do that, right? We have you know, it's blue collar unionized thinking, right? We have the labor of our hands, right? And our time. That's what we have.
And the will and the passion.
And the will and the passion. Exactly.
Also the mental illness.
Well, considering I believe all 3 of us here suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder and a couple other things. Yeah.
And I'm also a disabled writer, hit by a car and screwed me up permanently. So
yeah.
Fun times. But but that's the thing is, again, it's taking something that happened and turning it into something that was positive. So that was one of the things with me where I really got back into writing, because I wrote a lot in the past and then I stopped for a while. And that was when I was having nightmares after the accident. One of my psychologists was like, take your nightmares, write them out, and then you change the ending when you write it. And when you do that, that takes the power out of the dream, and actually the nightmares disappear when you keep doing that. So that got me back into writing again. And then I was in rehab for over 5 years, not able to work. Brutal. So I was writing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, and okay, so like we talk a lot about like the mainstream audience in the writing industry, and generally what that comes down to is middle class white boys. Like, you know, that is the default specific setting for the mainstream audience. Yeah. But really, if you look at the numbers, that is not a huge part of the audience at all. And I know that I and Sable have talked a lot about how important it is to bring those marginalized experiences to our writing. And not in like, you know, this is a book about PTSD. No, it's just my main character has PTSD and he'll watch her go through that crap. But because it does do a lot of work to make your audience feel like they are understood. We are no longer looking at these creative works and seeing not us reflected back. Yeah. We're starting to see us reflected back. And you only have that when you really have that kind of diversity. And that is probably the number one reason why I personally strive for that in my own writing and encourage it in others, is it's so important to know that you're not alone.
Yeah. And there's ways that you can do that. And I also, because there's the big thing of write what you know and don't write what you don't know. And there's back and forth on that. Like, again, if only straight people only ever write stories with straight characters, then there's not representation. But again, if you can have an LGBTQ plus community member character in your story, so long as you're not trying to write their trials and tribulations and what they're going through and their emotional responses to stuff, and you have got no idea behind that, then that's something that's not good. But like for myself, yes. I wrote I have a story that's being traditionally published this fall. It's coming out in an anthology. And the compliment that I take as a compliment, the comment that I got from the publishing house that was looking at it was when they read the story, because it's about a woman who's going through mental health issues, and they meet someone and their life ends up changing and whatever and going through. And it's actually the story of how my wife and I met. And their comment they gave back to me with it was that after they read it, they were surprised to find that it was written by a man. Because the entire story is from a female perspective.
Doing it right then.
And that was my thing. I'm like, okay, then I'm actually doing it, because when I've got female characters, don't get me wrong, I love the men writing women badly. That's an awesome, hysterical thing that men are stupid at doing.
Funny as hell.
Yeah.
So funny as hell.
But I don't believe in this thing of like, I've got this really cool character and she can do all these amazing things and it's fantastic and wonderful and great, and she's a female. It's like, that's not... Like, you may as well be saying, and she has black hair. Like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to... You can have a character that just happens to have a husband at home, and he's out doing something else, and that's as... You've got the inclusivity. You don't have to go into the details of everything. You can just have a character that happens to be gay, and there's not... You don't have to put a banner on it and plant a big thing around it. You can just have this character, and that's who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's kind of my mindset with writing marginalized groups that I am not a part of. Write the characters, do not write those stories.
Yeah. And sensitivity readers to make sure that you're not...
Yeah.
That
can be helpful.
There's one time I've had someone that I said, no, do not write this book or these stories, because he's in one of my writing groups, the professional writing group, and he's an older gentleman. And we were talking about sensitivity readers and stuff like that and whatever. And he's like, well, he's like, I've had people tell me that I shouldn't write this story because, I'm writing a story that involves the gays. And I'm like...
Okay, first of all, you said the gays.
I'm like, no.
That tells me right there you don't need to be writing that story.
Yeah, I'm like, no. And then another thing, he's like, I'm writing this historical fiction, and there's got, like... Because he's an old white guy. And he's like, it's about like black cowboys and all this stuff, and he's like, if I were to use like the terminology that they use with each other and stuff like that, I'm like, no. I mean, there's so many other ways they can show disrespect. I'm like, Louis Armstrong, the musician, it was always called Louis Armstrong. He's known as Louis Armstrong. His name is Louis Armstrong. And the fact of the matter was that the white men loved his music so much they wanted to have him play in their clubs, but their way of disrespecting him is they refused to call him Louis, so they called him Louis. And even if you listen to the song Hey Dolly, it says, hello Dolly, it's me, Louis Dolly. And that was his big thing, is that it's not Louis Armstrong, it's Louis Armstrong. And I said, so there's ways you can change someone's name. There's subtle ways that you can show disrespect within a story. And if you're, I said, yeah, so finally, after all this, like a couple of conversations, I'm like, you know what? Don't write those characters. Like, a sensitivity reader is not going to bring you where you need to be. Just don't write those characters.
Yep.
And that's not advice I typically give to people. But there's some instances where you're just like, no.
Yeah, you're coming at this from way too far away. Yeah.
So it's an interesting topic, though, to get into all of that. And that's what I'm excited to see, is all of the stuff that is going to be coming up with Writers Conduit, and all of these conversations that we're having
talk about that.
coming up and being discussed. And it's not just because it's easy for someone to say, if you haven't lived it, don't write it, and come up with these hard, fast rules that you have to go through. And it's like, it's nuanced. You need to have these conversations.
Okay, I have a short story about people who have mutant powers. I haven't lived that.
Exactly. Right?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. No, I'm with you, by the way. I think that kind of the purpose is to write in somebody else's shoes. Just, that's kind of part of the purpose of writing, is seeing the world from other people's perspectives, right? So yeah, if you can get inside their head, talk to people, treat it respectfully, learn what you need to know, and take correction when somebody says, that don't work, right? Then yeah, please do. Actually, okay, so from my perspective, waving my rainbow flag over here, right? Because like I said, I identify as demigender. I'm also bisexual. Please write our stories. I would like to see more of that. That's cool. If you have a character that happens to be bisexual, just run it by one of your bisexual friends or two, right?
Well,
and ask what they think.
And that's the same thing with me. Like, it's funny because I'm married. I've got my wife and we've got a little girl, but I'm bisexual as well. And I've had
There you
people
go.
comment and be like, "Oh, well, you're married. How can you be bisexual?" I was like,
Oh,
because I have a
even get
salad
me-
at lunch.
I'm married too. Don't even get me started.
Well,
on
that's the
that.
thing. Because I have a salad at lunch, it doesn't make me a vegetarian.
Facts.
Like it's.
Yep. Thank you.
And that's the thing with this is that, so yeah, we have to have these conversations, but also apart from just having a sensitivity reader, you need to have an expert or someone in that community that is with you that can guide you as you're writing through, that you can rely on, that you can contact, that you can talk to, and all this stuff, and not just wing it and then put all the weight on one or two sensitivity readers to come back with the entire community on their shoulders and say, "You got this right." Eli, the way I love it is, I don't know if any of you have seen Schitt's Creek, the television series.
A couple episodes, yeah.
There's one episode where David hooks up with
Also Canadian.
with the blanking on her name, but he hooks up with the Stevie, the girl in the show, and she's like, "I always thought that you drank white wine." She's like, "I'm a red wine drinker, and I always thought that you drank white wine." And he's like, "Oh, I drink white wine and red wine, and occasionally I like a rosé." And they had this really awesome scene about how it's like meat and potatoes, but it's like, the thing and all that. But no, and that's the thing, is having the representation is important. And I'm not saying go off and write everything that you don't know. Like, you have to be careful. You have to follow proper procedures and stuff like that. But if everyone only wrote what they knew, then we wouldn't have any representation in any of the stories.
Facts. Yeah.
Right.
I write male characters. Nobody gives me crap for that.
Yeah,
So
but female writers tend not to be as stupid as men writers when it comes to writing the opposite sex.
I write skinheads. Does that count?
yeah, but they're the bad guys.
Well, some of the good guys are reformed skinheads.
Well, there we go.
Sharps.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very. One of the things that I did do in regards to those kinds of stories is because it's such a gang-oriented situation with those, is they are very gang-oriented. They're very hard stories. There are very harsh stories. There's no idealization of this at all.
Yeah. Well, that's
But
yeah. Go ahead. You're gonna say, but
oh
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I was just agreeing. Actually,
I was agreeing as well,
having read some of this, I'm just like, yeah, that's a hard hitting story. All right, she doesn't sugarcoat anything.
Well, it's good to have that stuff. And going back to the idea of the rich bourgeoisie running everything.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of years ago, and this still burns in the back of my head, I got into an online dispute with someone, we'll call it a dispute, she said that in order to write science fiction and fantasy and other genres, I don't remember what the other ones were now, you had to travel the world. Because if you haven't traveled, then you can't write about anything. And I went back on, I'm like, have you heard of Google Maps? Have you heard of research? I can drop myself in the middle of Venice and look around and tell you exactly what's going on down that street. And I can also look at Google Maps and tell you what year and approximate month it was that happened in. So I don't have to travel. I can travel from the seat, from behind my desk. And that's where, if you're saying you have to travel to write, means you don't know how to research properly.
Yeah, facts. Okay, I live on this little street now. Just bought a house, right? Basic little working class duplex. My first house. I'm 47, right? I'm on this little street, okay? Right? It took every dime of savings we had and a couple of inheritances to do this, all right? So, I've been very poor a lot of my life, right? Here we are, right, on this little street. In this little block, we have a Filipino family behind me. We have an Indian family just over there, a Pakistani family over there. We have a Ukrainian family down the street, right? If you need to travel to write, who are you talking to, man? Like, seriously.
Yeah.
This is not an abnormal neighborhood, as a matter of fact, I live in the Okanagan Valley. It's kind of known for its conservatism. And this is my neighborhood. This is one street, right? There are people around you. Go talk to them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And get out of
you don't
your...
have to travel to write.
That's it. And get out of your city or your community. You don't have to go far to learn to see what things are. I was just having a conversation with someone where I live in the seat of power in Canada. Mm-hmm. And I've come to realize, and someone pointed it out, and I've come to realize that we live in the ivory tower here because it's very liberal thinking. it's professors and doctors and like liberal-minded artists and stuff like that. And there's all the politicians that are there as well. But so when all this stuff is happening in the world or across the country, we don't, unless you go to the outside. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's now teaching in a rural community several hours away, because that's the only spot she could get a job. And she was like, when I came out here, like there was a kid who went to school in grade 7 dressed as Hitler for a costume thing. And when she started teaching there, the kid is 16 years old. She's the first teacher to raise enough stink to have the kid suspended for his racist views and the things that he says and stuff like that.
Wow.
And she's like, the liberalized ideology of Canada and all that stuff, she's like, we are the minority. When you get out of the ivory tower and you go look around what else is happening, it's a very different world.
Now,
I don't necessarily agree.
I kind of have the opposite experience.
Yeah.
I grew up in the middle of U.S. Midwest, rural area. Our town had 3,000 people in it. And one of my coworkers, who everyone assumed was Hispanic, he was Hispanic, but everybody assumed he was Mexican, and started talking to him. He used to do supply lines for avocados in Guatemala. Wow. And so he would tell us about like different kinds of avocados, and I'm just sitting there going, "You're not Mexican. Why does everybody think you're Mexican?"
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, talk to people. The people in your neighborhood may not be who you think they are.
Right.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and that's not to. I also, before you jump in, Sable, I want to make sure I'm clear. Not saying everyone in rural areas are racist and conservative and all that other stuff.
Were.
But yeah, but I mean,
don't get me wrong, we had our share.
Yeah, in a lot of small towns and stuff like that, you do come across that. But this whole thing of like the way, because there's a perspective across Canada from what Ottawa looks like, and the fact that Ottawa is full of themselves and everything like that. And when you're living here, you're like, well, no, we're just like normal everyday people. And it's like and we are, but when you step out, it's like, yeah, it can be very different depending on where you go. Like when you go west, where it's super conservative, like Alberta is basically the Texas of Canada.
Yeah. They want to be Texas.
Yeah.
They would like to be Texas. Yeah.
Yeah.
They could go join Texas.
What were you going to say about the Ivory Tower, Sable?
Okay. Well, okay. I agree. You don't have to travel to write. I also think it's a really good experience if you can do it.
Yes.
I've done it 3 times. I've been across the country on like an absolute, like I saved for years. I had like this dirt budget once I drove across in a little hatchback, right? Okay, right. This is where I am. Canada is very regional, right?
Yeah.
We are very different countries in even different parts of BC. Never mind BC compared to Alberta. Never mind Alberta compared to Saskatchewan, Manitoba. Never mind, And about where Winnipeg is, there's a huge divide. Like the whole country transforms right about at Winnipeg, right? That was my experience with a little bit of a side trip into Northern Ontario, being similar but different. Like it had some things in quality, like in common with like rural Saskatchewan, but it also had like its very own character. We're very regional, and we don't realize that, right? Yep. Because we think of Canada as this Canadian identity, right? I think the United States is very similar, right? This is American identity. Well, what is that identity? Like it depends on where you are, and it's very, very regional because the country's so damn big, right? That we have just no way of actually having a whole picture, right? We're all grabbing part of the elephant and going, oh, the elephant looks like a whip. The elephant looks like a tree. The elephant looks like a wall.
Great way of putting it. Yeah.
So, and here it was interesting, right? Because we started very conservative when I was a kid. We were a small town, right? And now we're a little city, right? I've watched the Okanagan grow around me, because what happens is real estate goes up in Vancouver and people sell their houses and they buy a better house in the Okanagan because they want to move to the country, right? We're not a country anymore. This is not the country. This is a city. And there's like maybe 2 minutes, maybe a minute of driving separating every town in what is becoming the metropolitan area of the Okanagan Valley, right? And yeah, so things have changed, right? They started out very conservative and, maybe not understanding, not not necessarily directly racist, like not intentionally maliciously racist, but neglectfully racist because people didn't understand. They didn't have anybody here, but yeah, the white people over here and the reserve was over there, and never the twain did meet, right? But now
it's more like they're racist because that's what they were taught. They never questioned it, not because they're mean.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, but that's the thing though. Like here in Ottawa, where I was saying we take it for granted is because we are the power center of Canada, we have everybody.
Yeah.
I've got my community itself has the largest number of refugees for all of Ottawa. We have the oldest population for all of Ottawa. We have the most, because it's not all affluent, it's a scattered community. And we have some of the poorest areas in the city as well. And that's something that you can go, and we also have 2.2% of people in my community don't speak a word of English or French. They don't speak anything. And it was actually funny because when we had this derecho massive storm come through and devastate the city, I actually had that where I was walking with my wife going through and checking in on all the neighbors through the community. And we came across an Asian woman, and she pointed at one of the, instead of she waved, I'm like, oh, I just waved back. And she just pointed at one of the trees, and then she pointed and she just completely communicated with me in English or with signs. And I was like, that was the first time I actually came across someone in my community that didn't speak any English or any French. But I know there's a whole pile of them that are in there. And so that's the thing, is that it's even my parents that live an hour away in a small town, they just got a shawarma shop. They just got a pho shop. They just got all these different ethnic foods that are coming in. So we take it for granted that we can go at 2 a.m. and get an egg roll. Or we can go and get pho at any time of night and day and all this stuff, and that we have
and you actually know it's called pho, which nobody around here knows. We have pho. We have a few pho restaurants now, but nobody knows it's called that. They call it pho. They don't understand.
Yeah. So you get used to you think, oh yeah, well everyone is used to being this multicultural and surrounded by this many ethnicities and this much stuff and everything. It's no, it's not. Swiftness, no. If you're still here, have a great dinner. Thank you for coming through and hanging out. I greatly appreciate it.
And speaking of which, I now have to take off because I have to pick up my partner from work.
Yes.
But it has been an absolute joy having this conversation. Thank you so much for having us on. And me in particular. I don't know if Sarah's going to stay a while, but which is cool. But yeah, thank you. This was great. And I'm looking forward to seeing you at CONduit, and anybody else who, come check it out. It's free. The channel is just twitch.tv/writersconduit. So come check us out.
Yes, definitely check it out. Thank you very much for coming here. I greatly appreciate you being here. Enjoy the rest of your night. And
thank you.
I'm sure we'll connect before CONduit as well.
I'm sure we will. Awesome. Pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.